Welcome to another edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up. During this program, we will highlight the agenda items presented to the Lakeville City Council at their January 6th, 2014 meeting. First highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5A, Public Works Department Monthly Report. And to give the information regarding this agenda item is Public Works Director Chris Petrie.
And we will start talking about snow and ice control. In the month of December, we received snow accumulations on 15 of the 31 days of the month. And we saw, as is consistent today, with below zero temperatures on over 10 of those days. Public Works and Parks Maintenance staff spent over 2,300 hours in the month of December on snow and ice control operations, including 173 hours alone on Christmas Day. Also, with those very cold temperatures, as you're all aware, we had a lot of compacted snow and ice on our roadways. So to combat that, crews applied over 2,100 tons of de-icing chemicals during the month of December as well. I know the council's aware, but just as a reminder, we do have priorities, of course, for all of our snow and ice control. It starts with our collector roadways first, of course, followed by our residential streets. Then we focus on parking lots for our emergency services, moving on to cul-de-sacs and then sidewalks and trails. In all, in our priority list, we have 11 different priority groups that our staff follows to guide our snow and ice control operations, from clearing collector roadways all the way to clearing wells and lift stations throughout our system. Of course, the goal is to do our very best in providing safe driving and walking services for our residents and visitors. Now I want to talk very briefly about a project that was completed in early December, and that's the South Lake Marion improvements. The goal of this project is to reduce the discharge of sediment and nutrients that can be detrimental to water quality and cause harmful algae blooms in Lake Marion. The project was primarily funded through grants with the Dakota County Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as the Vermilion River Watershed Joint Powers Organization. The resulting design included project components, as you'll see on the detail above or on your screen. It's to route additional runoff through the pond in the southwest quadrant of the intersection, which is on the left-hand side of the screen. To construct iron-enhanced filtration in the pond on the southeast quadrant of the intersection. That's the area that has the yellow in it. And then lastly, to expand the pond that would be north of the roadway in the northeast quadrant to handle additional capacity prior to discharging into Lake Marion. Ultimately, the project resulted in retrofitting a 73-acre drainage area and redirecting over 6.5 acres of stormwater to that southwest pond. It also created an effective 3-cell filtration system, which I already talked about. And lastly, of course, enlarge that northeast pond before the water is discharged into Lake Marion. Moving on, the Minnesota Department of Health, or MDH, regularly conducts on-site surveys of our city's water system to evaluate the adequacy of our water sources, such as our well facilities, our equipment, the different operations and maintenance of our system for producing and distributing safe drinking water. As a result, our utilities division is constantly monitoring our well performance, our treatment process, and our distribution system. And you can see the photos in front of you and on your screen are photos from our water treatment facility. Our staff also maintains facilities in such a manner, of course, that their outward appearance reflects the quality of the operation and the high quality drinking water distributed throughout our system. Our utilities division has never received less than a satisfactory result, from any of our Department of Health inspections. Now, a few quick tidbits from around the city. First is, as the council is well aware, new development in Lakeville has been fairly significant over the last year or two. What that means for Public Works is added lane miles to our roadway infrastructure. And even if housing developments are not complete, the city does have a responsibility to perform some level of maintenance on our new roads. And at the very least, at this time of the year, with those added lane miles, those streets also need to be plowed in the winter. So in the last 2 years, we've added approximately 11 lane miles of streets to our system, and that brings our total to approximately 530 lane miles in our city street system. Now the last few slides, since this is the December 2013 monthly report, I thought I'd highlight our annual water use for 2013. And the year ended with water use slightly behind 2012 as a result of a wet spring extending into early summer, despite a slight uptick in August and September, as the council's aware, when we went through a fairly dry spell. Water use year to date, again, through 2013 was at 2.29 billion gallons. That's down from about 2.55 billion gallons in 2012. The peak day for 2013 actually occurred in September, which it actually did in 2012 as well, but in September 2013, our peak day was 16.95 million gallons in one day. And throughout 2013, we had 7 different days that we would consider large days of water use, where water use was between 16 and 17 million gallons a day on 7 of those days in 2013. Per capita or per person water use was also down, which is consistent with our totals for the year, but the per person or per capita water use was down about 10% in 2013 versus 2012, which is a very good thing. We were at about 107 gallons per capita per day. And the last graph in front of you kind of shows what occurs from the blue line in average daily use. You can see it during some of the winter quarter and fall quarters, and then you can see it, the slight uptick, or actually significant uptick, over the summer months. And those are your average days that you'll see with the blue line, and then the red line depicts, of course, those peak days in those particular months and what that means. As you all are well aware, our Utilities Division continues to work on improving our consumer awareness and other measures that are important to protecting and preserving our water resources and water conservation into the future. And with that, that concludes the December 2013 monthly report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 7, resolution approving the 2014 Community Development Block Grant application to the Dakota County Community Development Agency. And to give the background information on this agenda item is Community and Economic Development Director Dave Olson.
The city has been informed by the Dakota County CDA of the estimated community development block grant dollars we're expected to receive in 2014. Dakota County is an entitlement county, so they've had a process for a number of years. I think it's going on almost 30 now, whereby they distribute based on a formula, per capita formula, a good portion of their county CDBG funds to individual cities, and they also retain a portion of the annual entitlement to administer some programs that are housed and located within the CDA. We've been informed based on, and it's always kind of a guess until Congress approves the appropriation. We never know exactly how much is going to be received, but we still, and the CDA is required to get an application in to HUD in the first part of the year. So we have to basically, they provide us with their best estimates, and then we provide an application that identifies the activities that we propose to fund in the following year. The use of these funds, there's 2 principal criteria in the community development block grant funds, and you have to meet, and criteria, by that I mean objectives that you have to meet with any of the activities that you do. And the 2 main ones are benefit to low moderate income individuals or households, or elimination of slum and blight. And those are the 2 principal, and they have been for many years, the objectives of the community development block grant program. A number of years ago, and all you used to have to do was identify that your activities met one or the other. I'd say about 5, maybe 6 years ago, the CDA indicated that cities would be required to do at least 50% of their allocation for activities that benefit low, moderate income individuals or households. So we've been operating under that now for a number of years, and it seems to work fine. We are not recommending, or I should say, we are recommending one new activity. I'll talk about the existing activities first, and then talk about the new activity to comprise the total allocation estimated at $104,675. The existing activities and programs that we've had now for a number of years, the housing rehab program is it's a program that the CDA has administered for years. They use some of their countywide money in that program, but they also, a number of the cities also earmark some of their individual allocations so that ensures that there are funds available to do housing rehab loans in your city. It's a program that's administered by the CDA. They've got very experienced rehab specialists, so they do everything from take in the applications, do the verifications, do the inspections, come up with the specifications, and oversee the work once a contract has been let. It's a very successful program. It helps homeowners that meet the income guidelines to improve their owner-occupied housing units, and it benefits the community, and it helps preserve and improve the housing stock of our community. The other activity, which we've had now for a number of years, is the spot acquisition and clearance. The most recent example of that, obviously, as everyone's council's aware, we were able to utilize funds last year to acquire a foreclosed property located at the intersection of Ipava Avenue and County Road 50 or Kenwood Trail. It was a property that unfortunately had gone into foreclosure. It was an opportunity. It's at a high volume intersection that had actually driveways on both of those high volume roads, and eventually there'll be improvements made in that area, and it was an opportune tie-in. It was a house that had kind of gone into disrepair, so we were able to acquire and demolish the house, and now the city owns that corner. But that's an example, and we've used it in others particularly, and most of the time it's been in the downtown area. We've acquired other properties, either homes, really dilapidated homes in commercial areas of the downtown, or and at least one instance, a commercial building. So those two activities are $42,000 and $52,000 and some change respectively. The new activity that is being recommended for council's consideration is a allocation to fund senior activities at the Heritage Center. This is a program, and we've talked to some of the other cities in Dakota County. Farmington's been doing it now for a number of years, and basically what we're proposing to do is be able to write down the cost of future programs and activities to be held at the senior, to be made available at the senior center, so as to make them more affordable to a larger number of individuals. And if you can recall from our discussions a couple years ago in the senior center, to qualify, as long as the persons being served are 62 and over, they automatically fall under that low moderate income eligibility category. So we've met with Mr. Altagat and his staff a couple times. These funds, even though we're approving the application now, don't become available until July or August of this year, based on the federal fiscal year. So there's still some time, but and I would any specific questions on that, I guess I would request council direct to Mr. Altagat. But it basically would allow us to bring in, or allow Mr. Altagat and his staff at the Heritage Center to bring in and have newer activities. And the Block Grant Fund program is not intended to come and replace existing activities and existing programs that are already currently being funded. It's to fund new activities and new programs in this area, and so that's what's being recommended, and the allocation amount for that is $10,000. So that brings the total to 104, and that is the recommendation we're bringing forward for 2014, and I'll certainly stand for any questions.
Item number 7 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 8, resolution approving the 2014 Redevelopment Incentive Grant Program application to the Dakota County Community Development Agency. And once again, to give the information regarding this agenda item is Community and Economic Development Director Dave Olson.
Mayor, members of council, this is not an annual program, although it is one where the city has sought and received funds in the past, and it is the Redevelopment Incentive Grant Program, otherwise known as RIG as an acronym. All these grant programs seem to utilize acronyms, but the two projects, and we've talked about both of them previously. One of them is been authorized and recommended by the council, and we're probably within a month or so of being ready to go out for bid on it, and that is the downtown parking lot project, rehab project in the now city-owned parking lot behind Pioneer Plaza, adjacent to Holland Avenue. That project right now is estimated as an estimated construction cost of $350,000. Council is aware we actually acquired some additional property to assemble all of the ownership of that property last year. We've been working on design now for a number of months, and we've actually had the CDA convey some of the property that they previously owned in that parking lot. So that one is pretty much ready to go. We have an agreement in place, a joint powers agreement with the CDA to fund all of that project with CDA TIF money. It's a CDA TIF district that was terminated in 2010 and still had a cash balance available. And there are funds, and we have an agreement in place to construct that parking lot project with those funds. However, this is a block grant, or this is another funding source that would allow us to tap into some CDA grant dollars and preserve more of those CDA TIF dollars for a future potential project, not yet identified or even come forward with, no one's come forward with anything yet, but it's the same approach that we used when we did Market Plaza in 2008. We used CDA TIF money on that project, and we also went after and received a $200,000 RIG grant on that project. And so what it does is leverages two different funding sources to pay for the improvements. It allows us to do the project without any city property tax funds, and it preserves and allows us to have available TIF funds in the future for additional projects in the downtown in terms of redevelopment. So that one is fairly straightforward. The amount of the RIG grant on that project is $157,355. The other project, which we talked to the council several months ago about, was a proposal to improve the streetscape at the Holyoke Avenue parking lot in the downtown area adjacent to the Arts Center. As council's aware, currently there's the chain link fence and bituminous streetscape frontage to that parking lot along Holyoke Avenue, and we brought forward a proposal or a preliminary estimate to redo that streetscape to basically just add a grass boulevard area in front of the parking, remove the chain link fence, put in new sidewalk and some new street trees. The price tag, the preliminary estimate on that project was $100,000. Council indicated to us at that point that that was a little bit on the high side, and also that we didn't sense there was a comfort level using CDA TIF money to fund 100% of that. What at least we're suggesting as an option with this RIG grant is to include and incorporate that project into that grant application. And we've also asked the designers to go back and take another look at, and we've reduced the amount of landscaping, particularly the plant materials. It's basically now gone to just a turf with some ornamental trees and not a lot of the other type of landscaping that was being shown previously. We've reduced the size of the concrete island that would form the boulevard streetscape along the Holyoke Avenue side, brought the project cost down to approximately $75,000. So the way the RIG grant works is that it's a 2-for-1 match. For every, you have to have $2 other dollars for every $1 RIG grant money, so it's a 2-for-1 matching grant program. So as the attachment to the council cover memo indicated, the $75,000, and Jim, why don't you just put in the overhead, we'll put this down. The construction cost, as indicated now, has been revised downward to $75,000 for the parking lot project. We've included we don't have plans for that one like we do on the Holland Avenue project, and because we don't have plans, we put in a bit of a contingency to bring the total project cost estimate up to $90,000, even though the construction is now estimated at $75,000. So basically, we could secure a RIG application to pay for 1/3 of that, or $90,000, or up to $30,000 of the $90,000, and then use CDA TIF money to pay for the rest. So that would be $60,000. So if you look down at the bottom of the totals for both projects, if the council were to elect to do pursue a grant funds for both projects, it allows us to seek $187,000 in RIG grant money. Again, that's one-time grant money. It's available on a competitive basis. The deadline is January of this year, so they only have one single funding cycle a year. The next funding cycle would be January of 2015. And then $379,000 would be used of the CDA TIF money for the total project cost of both of those parking lot improvements projects of $566,000. It isn't necessary that both of these be lumped in. We've suggested that as an option. If the council's only comfortable doing the project that you've previously indicated a desire and approval to do, we can certainly do that and scale back the application. We think this is an opportunity, again, to scale back the cost and introduce other funding sources to hopefully address some of the council's concerns about the overall cost of the Holyoke Avenue project, as well as the proposal previously to use all TIF money to pay for it. Now it's basically a 1/3, 2/3 funding mix. So with that, I will the action before council, and I'll certainly stand for any questions on either of these projects, but would be to approve a resolution. If the project is funded and it is a competitive grant funding program, we would bring a grant agreement back. So this doesn't commit us to doing either of these projects, but it would, as I talked to one of the council members today, it commits us to making an application.
Item number 8 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Next highlighted item on the agenda was item number 9, consider the 2014 to 2016 Strategic Plan for Economic Development. And once again, to give the background information regarding this agenda item is Community and Economic Development Director Dave Olson.
As council's aware, and we're on the normal every 3-year cycle of doing strategic plans for economic development, and we've been doing those here in Lakeville since the mid-90s, and this is, I think, the 3rd or 4th one that I've been involved with. This time it was a little bit different in that the city had embarked or was working on the Envision Lakeville process, so we typically start these in mid-summer of the year prior to when it needs to be in place by. You were still wrapping up, or there was still work being done on the Envision Lakeville process at that point. So we held off a little bit longer than normal, but it was beneficial in that the decision was made, and I think it was a wise one, to engage Craig Rapp to work on this strategic plan for economic development, because it followed right on the heels of the Envision Lakeville process. So obviously Mr. Rapp was very well acquainted with and involved with the Envision Lakeville from beginning to end, and so it made a lot of sense. So we began the process in October, as we have done in the last few rounds of this process, with a half-day planning work session of the EDC that took place this year on October 8th. It involved a review of the Envision Lakeville recommendations. It also included strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or otherwise known as SWOT analysis, for in terms of economic development issues, and was the beginning of the process to identify priorities and outcomes related to economic development activities. That was followed up by another EDC work session on the 12th of November, and the EDC met for part of that just in meeting as the EDC, but the last half of that meeting was a joint meeting with the council and the EDC, at which time the recommendations and the priorities that were identified previously were discussed and somewhat revised as a result of the discussion between council and EDC members on November 12th. Resulted in 6 strategic priorities that will become the basis of the work program for the next 3 years. And I'm just going to, you received the document, you'd seen most of the information hopefully before, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail tonight, but basically the priorities that were identified were the high skill, high wage job creation priority, the infrastructure to leverage opportunities as a priority, Business retention and expansion as a priority, and we spent a fair amount of time talking about that, both at the EDC as well in the joint meeting. Incentives and tools to achieve success, and this is a kind of a carryover from the last strategic plan, which resulted in the city updating its TIF policies, its tax abatement policies, its business subsidy policies, but that's going to carry on into this next, probably a little bit more on the implementation side of hopefully some projects that are going to be coming forward here in the next few months or later this year. And another one, and this was wordsmithed a bit in the joint meeting, enhancing a pro-business environment. The fact that we're going to, some of the things, get back into doing surveys on commercial industrial projects upon completion, as we're having more of those types of activity again, and just probably a continuation of the continuous improvement process that was originally started in the developer forum a couple of years ago. And then finally, high-density housing, and that has been discussed and was discussed at length by the EDC as well as the joint session of the council, and the priorities and the specifics of that are still obviously in the process of being determined. The CDA is doing a housing study using Maxfield Research to do a countywide housing study. The results of that are going to be available in the next month or two, and they'll have specific information on all the communities in Dakota County, including Lakeville, and we'll use that and other information to come up with some recommendations and initiatives relative to high-density housing. So where we're at right now is staff will be developing a work plan based on these initiatives and some of the key outcome indicators and that were discussed and are included in the document before you, and we'll start the discussion on the work plan with the EDC at their next meeting on January 28th. And so the request tonight is to basically have the council formally accept the recommended strategic plan for economic development 2014 to 2016.
Item number 9 was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Well, those were the highlighted items presented to the council at their January 6th, 2014 meeting. If you have any questions or comments regarding these agenda items, please feel free to call City Hall. The number is 952-985-4400. Thanks for watching this edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up. Frozen ice in cube form does not possess a dangerous threat when in a glass. But put that same frozen ice on a street or as a coating of snow on a highway, and it does possess a real danger. In Minnesota in 2012, there was an average of 189 crashes per day. Don't let snow and ice-coated roads give you the slip. Slow down when driving this winter.